Hi, I'm Jim Atkinson, Managing Partner for Avidity Wealth Solutions. We're back with Greg Litz and talking about his journey to sell his firm. Greg, last time we spoke, you discussed coming to the realization that it would be best to sell your firm and partner with one that would allow you to focus on clients and growing your book. It's a big decision. You've now gotten weeks into this process and curious to how it's going and where you are.
Well, it's going good. It is a big decision. I mean, it's a personal decision, right? It's not only my decision, it's my wife's decision, it's my kids' decision, so because everybody's involved. But the process is going good. You know, we've kind of narrowed it down. You do, like you would with any big decision, a pro and con list, and you kind of work through that and the numbers. So we're getting close.
Well, today we want to get a little more granular, if that's okay.
Sure.
So let's go through a few items that might be top of mind for you. First being price. And there's long-term valuation versus long-term value. So my guess is that some firms might throw out a big number or throw out a big check, but then you might look at as long-term value not being there. You still have, what, a 10, maybe a 15-year runway
That's
in your
right.
career?
Yeah.
And so how do you weigh those two? Because it might be something you want to do, jump at a big check up front or a high valuation, but then if you look at 10 years, it may not be there. So how do you weigh that?
No, it's a good question. Like a lot of guys, I think it's a three-part answer for guys. It could be somebody who's young, right? And so that valuation may be different. It could be somebody my age who has still a long runway. Could be a different valuation, a different payout structure, whether it be cash equity, or it could be a guy who's going to retire. So all three of those have different kind of outcomes. I'm in the middle, as you mentioned, right? I've got a lot of runway left. So it's more about maybe a little cash, but it's more about how quickly can my equity grow? How can I make, because as a financial planner and investment manager, I'm trying to do my own planning too for my own family to get to where I want to be, right? To my objective. And the pricing of the equity, my equity and the acquiring firm's equity is, I think, the most important.
But then there's the growth of the combined firms.
Yeah,
because your equity is going to grow with their equity.
Therein lies kind of the gray area, right, as to what each firm offers in terms of, new business growth, and everybody's going to give you more bandwidth because they're going to take running the firm off your plate. So it really kind of boils down to what is the differentiator in terms of bringing in new business, right? How can you grow your book faster? And also, how can the firm themselves, because you're diversifying your book into many different advisors, how fast are they going to grow?
So is there a sweet spot in the firm size? Because if you go with a really large firm, you might struggle with thinking, no matter what I do, the impact is going to be so small, because some firms are saying, they brought in a couple hundred firms like yours. So do you want to be one of 200 or one of a much smaller number? But then there's a size of firm where you say, we've got scale and everything I need to get the job done and I can make an impact, but they're not too big. So have you thought about this?
I have. I don't know what the number is. I can tell you, just because they're big doesn't mean they're not going to grow faster or as fast, because they may have, a big part of this is how quickly can they add M&A. And so if they have a team in place that can do that, that's a factor, right? So, but they can also be so big to where maybe private equity is already involved, and that changes the valuation of what your equity is going to be rolled into. So that gets gray as well. So you have to kind of look at how they're valuing their own firm versus how they're valuing yours.
So that leads to my next question. So firms with dry powder, meaning private equity, they've got a lot of resources they can tap to bring in other firms, versus those that do not, maybe a little smaller, don't have private equity, but you get the ownership structure is a little more clean.
Well, what I've seen is the firms that have private equity already in and have those resources are valued higher, and so therefore it's more expensive for you to roll your equity into them.
Right.
Even so, they may say they're going to grow faster, but you're paying up for that, right? So as I mentioned, I have 10, 15 years or more runway left in my career. Well, what is that firm that you're buying into, right? When you roll your equity into, what kind of runway do they have? So, maybe the first 2 or 3 years your growth isn't as fast as it would be with a big firm. But what I'm looking at is, okay, what the next 7 years behind that? Are they ramping up to grow like those bigger firms did?
So what you're talking about is the arbitrage of the delta
That's
between
right.
your value versus their value, and can they continue on that track, or have they sort of capped? I mean, looking at some
That's
of the
right.
valuations for even the large firms, you must think there's not much room for them to go up.
Right, I think it's two-part, right? You get that delta between your valuation and their valuation. and then you get a delta between how many firms are bringing in and M&A activity. So it's two-part, really. But I think you got to have both, right? And I look at it pretty simple. It's like, can I double or triple my equity, in the next 15 years?
Sure. Is that what you're looking for, kind of a double or a triple?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's failure if it's a double.
I would agree. So we're in Texas. You're a Texan. So curious, Texas versus not Texas. So a lot of advisors in Texas, would prefer to work with a Texas-based firm. But I would say most of the aggregators coming into Texas are not from here. So just curious your thoughts on, does that play a factor at all? Does that matter?
It's a good question. It's not as concrete, but I will tell you, I think it matters to clients in Texas. And from what I've seen, some of these bigger firms have had trouble buying Texas RIAs. That's just what I've seen. I've seen some of the broker-dealers, they've had success getting guys to move from a Merrill Lynch to another broker-dealer firm. But I think these big national firms have had trouble acquiring RIA firms because they're not from Texas. And you've seen even some of these bigger aggregators kind of rename themselves as so-and-so Texas.
Right.
And so to be able to not change my pitch that I'm a locally owned and operated firm is kind of important to me.
So it weighs to some degree, small degree?
No, to me, I can't say it's the biggest factor because it's not, but it plays into it because my clients are small business owners that built their business in Texas and do business with Texans. So it absolutely is a factor.
So you can continue that. There's continuity in your story.
Right, absolutely. Because my clients are going to go, well, who are these people, Greg? We don't want some New York firm, and so it helps the transition, I think.
Speaking of change and transition, sort of policies and procedures. So every firm is going to run a little bit differently. Some are very strict and pretty tight on their policies and procedures and how you relate to your clients, communicate. How does that weigh in your decision making?
Not much. It actually it concerns me more for the other guys coming over, my other team coming over.
Staff.
Yeah, because no one likes change, and everybody's worried about what that means to their position and how that change will affect their day-to-day life. So it's less important to me, but it is important to the staff, and they want to get their hands around like, okay, well, we used to do it this way, Greg. Does that mean we're going to have to change everything?
Right.
Well, the fact is, we're a small firm. Maybe this firm has, a better workflow. Maybe we should be doing it this way.
Right.
So I think you got to be a little bit open-minded, right, and say that, yes, you've created this nice little shop, but maybe there's better ways to do it.
Right. Yeah.
So I think in terms of policy and procedures, you better have more of an open mind.
On better ways to do it, one of the changes you'll have to adapt to is tech stack.
Yeah.
So your tech stack is good, but maybe could be better.
It could definitely be better. I will tell you, my personal opinion is most of the bigger firms like you guys and some of the others, the tech stack is pretty general. It's pretty much the same across the board. You're going to have all the pieces in place, but it would be an upgrade. It's going to be an upgrade for our size shop, for sure. I think anybody our size and smaller, it's an upgrade.
Does it matter to you if some of the technologies match up?
Not really. I think I've kind of worked through that already emotionally, knowing it's going to be a lot of work on the front end. You get into how you like to do things in the morning, during the day. You're going to have to change it probably a little bit.
Right.
But in the end, a lot of this software, it's the same.
Does anybody's tech stack stand out to you as better, or do all the big firms kind of look about the same?
They look about the same. What does stand out are those who are lacking, and you can tell. Like when you look at a larger firm, you're like, this is the same tech stack I'm running. What do I need these guys to change that? Right. I wouldn't, because the way I look at it is I'm never going to do anything that's not better for my clients.
Sure.
So the only move I make, first thing I ask myself, is this better for my clients? So if the tech stack has to be probably better for me to even consider it.
And most are, and a few are
I think
lacking.
of the big ones and the ones we've talked to, it is.
Greg, we've talked about tech stack and EOS. Previously, we talked about culture. We've talked about price and a few other things. If you're advising another advisor who's going through this process, what would you tell them is some of the top things to consider?
I'll go back to, we did talk about culture, but I'll kind of go back to the people side of it, which relates to culture. And one of the most important to me was to just make sure that I actually get along with the people I'm going to be in business with. You have, we're in the relationship business, right? Our clients can be our friends, and in that relationship business, if you walk into the office and can't get along with the people that you're working with, it's going to be a long 10, 15 years for you, right? So I think, to me, one of the most important is the people aspect. Do you trust these people? Do you like, you're going to want to work with them every day? So I think that is very important. And also, it's something that made me think about this with just the people and being local. We talked about being in Texas, yes, but for me, being in Houston, the local aspect was important because it's, so to speak, a plug-and-play opportunity where you have the office set up, where some of these national firms and you would be having to build out a regional presence. Well, this is, it's here, it's ready. I can walk down the hall and speak to the investment management team. I can walk down the hall and speak to the financial planners, whereas it may be a call to the East Coast or a call to the West Coast in some of the national firms.
It's an important decision. We've talked about a lot of these factors. We look forward to following your process and following along with you. Thanks for letting us look behind the curtain.
For sure, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep.